just about every athlete, person, former athlete, human who does athletic things beyond just active daily living, who I know have been encountered, there's like, I wouldn't say all of them, a large majority deals with aches and pains. As a former college basketball player, I was constantly dealing with little issues here and there. My teammates were, players we played against were. It's just part of the gig. Being sore and pushing yourself to the limits of performance is innately going to come with some sort of baggage. Now, people like to make you think, oh, you should be bulletproof and you shouldn't have aches or pains and whatever. Majority of those people who don't have aches and pains, I'd be willing to bet, I don't know. I'd be willing to bet they don't do really that many demanding physical things. And what I mean by that, if for some reason we like to say, oh, we shouldn't have any aches and pains, and when we say something like that, then anyone who has any aches and pains feels like they've done something completely wrong, and then they try and rework the entire process. But when you look at physical activities, especially ones that we enjoy, there's nothing innately like safe about them. It's like saying that driving a car is safe, walking around is safe. Racing a car is not as safe as just driving around. Doing high performance things is not innately as safe as just living your life. Especially because three things. One, it's unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen when you're playing sport. There's other people around you. Two, it's at your highest outputs. You're trying your hardest. You're running your fastest. Three, you really enjoy it probably. So you're more susceptible to overdoing it. Even four is because you like number three, you enjoy it. If you do have aches and pains, you'll keep trying to play through them because sometimes you think the enjoyment of the game is worth more than the aches and pains. And this is really important to understand. Now, granted, when we have situations like this come up, you want to avoid anything that creates excessive aches and pains, and you don't try to identify where they came from and mitigate the ones that are avoidable. But as an athlete right now, my knee currently hurts. My left knee, my tibial tuberosity on the lateral side, is dealing with some pain. Why? Well, it's probably because you see in the ground right here, I put an Exergenie on my floor. I got really into it and was running a whole bunch of sprints in my basement. More sprints than I should because I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's a high output. And I probably evoked a lot of overload, some sort of tendonitis response in there because I hadn't been running sprints. Not like that at all. I mean, I had been running some, but nothing to that magnitude. And my workload spiked at a huge, massive increase in my workload. And so that's what comes with the territory with not being smart, but I really enjoyed it and it was fun. And I'm sure many of you have experienced something very similar. What's important to realize, and for myself, is that I am different than someone who is a professional athlete or a competitive athlete that still has some level of some stakes, right? So there's some possible rewards for playing. I don't have any rewards when I play anymore. And so as a former college athlete, if I were to be kind of aches and pains and have some injuries, well, I would play through them. If I could play at 90% of my physical ability, I could still probably play near 100% of my competitive ability. When you get in the game, you don't feel that pain anymore, and maybe afterwards you might, but you can still play really well. Now, as someone who's older now and doesn't play competitively with any rewards, I don't have any incentive necessarily to try and play at 90%. And this is something I continuously run into because it may be an obsessive quality of mine. That is, when I get back to 90% physical, I try then to operate at 100% capacity. And I constantly keep getting bumped down to maybe 85% to 90%. Now I can still work out at 85 and 90%. But what happens is I'm never recovering back to 100%. And this is a cycle that seems to occur with myself because I have a gym in my basement, more so than not because it's the ease of use, but also because I'm maybe crazy and you might be a little bit like me. But one thing I regret is really not being patient enough and trying to actually recover back to 100%. So when we think about recovery, we have to think about relative to the rewards that could be from missing out on recovery, and also relative to our long-term goals. Now, I don't have any season I'm in, and so in reality, taking a week off would do nothing to my career. Taking a month off would do nothing to any of my career endeavors. So I have that luxury to do that if I need to take time off, and I should do that. Some athletes don't have that luxury. Some athletes have a shorter window. If you're a professional athlete, you might have, 1 to 5 years. If you're a collegiate athlete, you only have 4 years. And if you're a high school athlete, you might only have 1 to 2 years, depending on what year you're in. I should say 4 at least. But you get the idea, because at each stage there is some level of possible return on your investment of playing kind of sore. Different than being hurt, by the way. Certain things I've talked about in the past, and this is what my dad told me, and funny enough, it's fairly accurate. Does it hurt or will it hurt you? And what I mean by that is sometimes you got a bruise or something that's, a sprained ankle to an extent or something of that nature, where if you were to play, not a severe sprained ankle, but if you were to play, the increase in playing wouldn't actually lead to any other issues. So it hurts, but it won't hurt me. That's different than if I continue to play, like if I have some sort of a stress fracture or tendonitis. It will get worse, and then it will hurt me. So you get to think about those in consideration. So not to get too off topic, but that is a little bit of a helpful advice, as small as it might be. Thanks to my dad for that one. So I just want to get across the message that depending on your situation, your tolerance to suboptimal feeling might be more or less. And respecting that doing athletic things and pursuing higher athletic outputs is going to innately come with some aches and pains. There are going to be some times you're hurt, and sometimes you're going to have tendonitis or mysterious things that appear to flare up. Things that when you get older and you cross the threshold of 28, at least for myself, now that I'm 30, random things start to hurt, and then random things don't hurt anymore. And sometimes a day off does you some really good, just a good old-fashioned day off or two. So that's my big takeaway for anyone listening, is that really realize where you're at. Because one thing I wanted to mention at the end of this is that if we do train constantly at that 85, 90%, maybe we are more susceptible to reoccurring injury, but we also never actually get back to 100%. And our training is always chronically being modified to fit those issues. And when we're constantly modifying our training to work around an injury that could have easily been solved maybe in a week, and now we spend 2.5 months working around it, we run the risk of, with those modifications causing an injury or overuse elsewhere, because in concept you're modifying it slightly, placing the load elsewhere as opposed to what is normally placed on. So whatever that tissue has not been used as much might be used more. And then second to that is you're actually never doing the exercises that you are primarily most interested in, because you're modifying out of them. And you're trying to do a substitute for it versus trying to work your way back. And so prioritizing your full recovery when necessary is very important, because long term you will actually get more out of your training, even though short term you might have to take a couple steps back. Kind of like 1 step back, 2 steps forward. Well, hopefully 3 steps forward, or more than 1. Well, if you do 1 step back and 1 step forward, you're even. So 1 step back and maybe a handful of steps forward. So that's my little spiel on injuries, aches, and pains. I appreciate you guys listening as always. Thank you so much. Feel free to subscribe and share. We got 10,000 subscribers, which is pretty cool. So I appreciate you guys. Take care, and thanks.